Hey everyone, it's Joe Lyons here in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, I'm Jackie from Copenhagen.
And so today we were just chatting, and I realized like I had another topic that I thought would be fun to discuss. It's not actually on automation per se; it's on saving time. And the easiest way, it's one of the things I learned. I was reading a book. What was it? Book? Oh, I think it was a Brian Tracy book.
Brian Tracy.
Yeah, he's a guy that's really he's a great author. He's got a lot of great books. One of my favorite books is called Eat That Frog, and he basically says, look, what if you tackle the hardest things to do first, right? So what if the worst thing you had to do was to eat a frog? You eat it first in the morning. Hey, and the rest of the day it's just easier, right? And you actually do the stuff. You don't put it off, and so that's anyway. That's one of his books. So in one of his books, he talked about we can teach you how to do all these things. He's more about organization and thought process and prioritizing. And one of the best ways is to, when you prioritize, like one of the fastest, easiest ways to save time is just to stop doing stuff that really doesn't matter, right? So go through your list and see if you can identify things that really don't need to get done, don't do them. And when I worked at TI, the lady training me, and she used to do this thing. It was called, what do we call it? Schedule? No, it doesn't matter. Calendaring. And we would take the next month's emails that we were going to schedule and to send out, and she would go and run all the queries and then say how many respondents we're going to get each one, right? Because also, like if Jackie was in one that was going on Tuesday, we have policies that says you can't get another one within 3 days. And so we would exclude Jackie from that. And so it was dynamically changing depending on when you scheduled your email to go out. One of the biggest problems, though, was no one was ever ready on time. So no matter what she did, it never really represented the real world because everything got pushed. And so when I took over for her, I made this decision. This is the other one, is like I'd much rather to ask for forgiveness than permission, right? So I literally just stopped doing it. And she used to spend a whole week out of a month doing this. And so I just said, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to see what happens. And so I stopped having the meetings, and one person wrote me and said, hey, when's this meeting? And I said, well, we stopped doing this. And she's like, oh, okay. And so like 4 months, I don't remember how long later, the girl that trained me, she's like, hey, how's it going? And she's like, how is the calendaring? And I'm like, yeah, I stopped doing that. She's like, what do you mean you stopped doing it? I'm like, I just stopped. And she's like, well, didn't everyone freak out? I'm like, no. So anyway, it was a wonderful story of how I got like a whole week out of a month, right, back to do other stuff that actually really mattered.
Yeah. I don't think I have a similar story, but of course we all experience stuff that resemble it, right? So I actually do have something I that came to mind when you told that story. And I was on a project with a new program that was kind of supposed to be an intermediary to external data deliverers. So they could put it into that, and it would then be the barrier onto our live system, right? And we used a lot of time on analyzing, figuring out what was needed, what did need to change. Paid quite a good amount of money to have developers change it to our needs. And then the project it was supposed to be used on, great big project, actually we didn't make it. The program wasn't ready in time. So they had to go the old school way and do everything in Excel and whatnot.
Ooh.
And they did. Of course, that was needed. They were on to bigger things. And then it turned out that the program we'd used so much time on, maybe it didn't really fit for anybody else. And nobody really had the money to get it the rest of the way. And then I was like, I had never liked the idea. I felt it was silly to invest so much time on something that was supposed to be in the middle. They had something ready. We were ready to get it, but we needed something to have it in the middle. Do we really need a system that's as complex as the two others? But yeah, okay, fair enough. And for a long time, didn't hear about it. And then all of a sudden, I was contacted and like, do you want to be on this committee that is going to decide if it's worth to keep this program? I was like, I can be on that, fair enough. I'm not sure which other things I can say that I haven't already said, but fair enough. And then weeks went by and we didn't hear anything about a startup of that or anything. And one of my other colleagues, he had been invited to actually be on the deciding part of this. So the conclusions that we would end up with, he would then hear them and decide to do specific action from those. Fair enough. And everything comes to shove. It ended up being like one executive just said, we're not going to keep it. Oh. So we had used a lot of time and a lot of stuff was being ready to be done to decide if we needed to keep it. And then someone over here, nah. And that was all that was needed.
Yeah.
Someone just had to say,
right.
No.
Right.
No, don't use any more resources on that. I was really happy that it was possible because the company had the size it had, and everybody's at times seems undecisive.
Absolutely.
I need to hear everybody before I take a decision.
Oh,
and
man. Yeah.
Not always needed. Sometimes it's just, yeah.
And some people think you all have to agree, right? That like, oh, everyone has to agree on it. And that isn't usually necessary, right? If you have a senior person that's willing to, put themselves out there, they can listen to the arguments and make a decision and just say that, we can't please everybody, right? It's silly to think you can.
Yeah. And it was kind of the same thing with one of the other bigger programs where we were buying a big solution for the entire company. All kinds of different tasks were supported within this program, right? This interface. But the problem for me was that we had gotten a pre-built solution. It was able to do what was needed, but still the project behind it went out to everybody and asked them, what do you need? What do you need?
Yeah.
And then they actually took the time and paid the money to have these small iffy things made into it because they wanted something here and they wanted something. I was like, let's go with an 80-20, right? Yeah. So
absolutely.
80% is what we need. Let's go with that. And the last 20% is going to be, okay, fair enough. We can learn the last part instead of build the tool for. It's a mindset sometimes.
I'm really glad you brought up the Pareto, I think how it was pronounced. I can't remember, but that principle, right? The 80-20 rule, because I was going to come back from your story and say the other thing that comes to mind is, which I know you and I have discussed a lot, is, automating everything from the very beginning to the very end is generally very time consuming, and even with the automating of a given process, like, well, what if I just do 80% of it? I can probably do that in a few minutes, right? Or a couple hours, maybe, depending on the project, right? But often you can crank that out very quickly and be like, you know what? It's done. And it's not all automated, but hey, I got something great and it took me a few hours and I get to use it. It's that other stuff that it's, I think for some people, it's very hard to stop and just say, it's not worth the effort to keep on programming to automate it out, right? There are times it should be, don't get me wrong, right? But often it's not.
I'd say if it's my own thing, where I'm solving my own task, I can keep fiddling with it. I'll make it run the entire way at some point. But if I'm making something for a colleague over here,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a matter of how much time is he using, how much time are we coding, how much time and stuff like that, I'll try and find the things that are going to be most painful to code and kind of see, is that something that fits okay with him manually still doing that? One example was recently one of my colleagues asked, he had a lot of data he needed to input into another company's web interface.
Mm-hmm.
And we had all of the data in Excel. He just needed to pick a new row and take all of the columns, put them into different fields. Fair enough. And that was quite easy to do and pretty simple when you know what to do.
Right.
But what wasn't simple was actually getting to the correct place to enter in the data. So you needed to log in, then you needed to go through a specific, I think it was a Silverlight programming interface on the web page, right? So you had to select a few values and click some stuff, and then it would make these, coded loads. So there was no actual events happening on page and stuff like that. So it was really hard to detect.
Yeah.
It's like, but when he got to that final page, it was, for him, it was entering his credentials and doing 3 clicks.
Yeah.
It would have taken me hours to actually code through it to find out where and what. But when we were on that last page, it literally took the script seconds to enter it, and it took me maybe an hour and a half to actually code it.
Mm-hmm.
And he now has an Excel sheet with all his values. He logs in, he clicks the button to make a new one, then clicks the hotkey, fills in everything, sends it in, everything is happy. He then updates the page and sees that the values are the correct ones. Mm-hmm. And then he saves. He actually clicks save, and that's the final step. So he clicks new and he clicks save. That's what he still does within the task, right? Mm-hmm. Everything else is automated.
Cool.
So he has gone from clicking new, back and forth with values, blah, 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 checking that he's put in everything, and then saving maybe in half an hour later. But again, it's just, don't automate the beginning, don't automate the last part, because you wanted to check it anyway. So yeah.
So, that's a brilliant point, Jackie. That's actually one maybe we should plan for a webinar talk through, right? Of looking at the overall process of what you have to do, right, for a given task, and then breaking it down and saying, should we automate the entire thing? Let's put them into sections that make sense. And then while we're doing it, rate each section on how hard it is to automate. And it's not just going to be the difficulty, but the consistency, right? The likelihood of it working, right? This and that. And that would be a great way to break it down and help make sure you're spending your time, everyone's time, wisely, right?
Yeah. And that's the exact point to the same thing that you said. She had been doing something because she's always done that, and everybody was sitting there in whatever types of meetings and doing, what was it you called it? Calendaring?
Yes. Yeah.
And removing that step actually ended up not having much impact on the overall scheme of it, but you save 25% of your time. For
stuff that actually wasn't even accurate anyway, because nothing ever went out on time. It never truly reflected what was really going to happen. That was one of the big reasons why I did it. It wasn't really time saving. I'm like, this is stupid. This isn't what happens. Like, and then it was the how much time, but
Yeah, and that's the next part, right? Because again, with analyzing something, it might have been fair enough to log into the thing and stuff like that, but compared to the process I just described, where he was already doing all of the steps, just removing the most painful of them, was what really made him happy, right? So, and I think he asked if it was possible to copy more than one value at a time. I was like, sure it is. Let me see what it is that you need to do. And it's pretty clear that he was entering stuff into a browser, and he was getting the predefined values from an Excel sheet. So I was like, you know what? I have some time after lunch. Let's sit down and actually look at this, right? And I think that a company and people in general could do that way more than they do.
Yeah.
And I had a colleague recently. She's a bit older than me and stuff like that. And I saw that she was doing something that to me seemed like it was something she did often. And I asked, I didn't come out and say, should we automate that? But I said, should I sit down and look at what we are doing here, and maybe we can do something to make this less painful, or whatever I said. Don't remember the exact words, right? But it's like, nah, it's not that bad. That's the thing, right? Because each time she actually uses 7 minutes on filling out that form or whatever it is,
right?
It's just unneeded minutes.
Yeah.
If we can remove 5 of those, and she does that a few times a week. Let's say she does it 6 times. That's half an hour of time she could have used on something else, and that's only one time each day. So if she does that each day at 9 or whatever.
Yeah. You know, it's so I was mentioning to Jackie earlier, I have a rental, and so I've been over working on it, and my son he's 12. He's been coming over and he's working with me. And I told him, I said, when I'm deciding how much to pay you for the day, because I pay him because he's working, I said, look, some things you're doing, it would take me just as long time to do it as it does for you. And I said, I'm happy to pay you a lot, what it would, I said, I'm not paying him $100 an hour, but I'm like, look, I would be doing that. It takes me just as long time to unscrew the light, the fixtures and screw them back in. I'm like, look, you can do that just as well as I can, right? Versus there's other things that are really complicated and I just can't have you do them. And so maybe he's sitting around and waiting, but it's one of those things also to what you were just describing there with your lady friend, that some things she's doing, it takes 7 minutes of her time. And yet she could, if a computer, if you can automate that and she can be doing stuff something that really needs a human to do, right? That's one of those other things that goes in there. Of course, how hard is it to automate? But should you really be doing something so quote unquote easy? But again, I think you and I have talked about this some. Some people view that as like downtime. It's not, they don't have to think. And so it's easy, they kind of want to do it because it's not hard and, but they're not thinking about how productive they could be, right? It's
but to me, when I have done enough of that, so I have automated specific tasks or whatever, when I then have time to check the news online or whatever it is, I don't feel bad. I have absolutely no issue with doing. Other people might have the same thing, but I know that.
Yeah.
I've saved my own workload so many times over that me doing that once in a while has no inkling on how long I should have used on something else. But when she sits there, works, types every day, and she's one of those lucky people who have her screen turned against the door, so everybody who comes in looks at her screen. So she tries to look very, very productive, and she should, and she is. But I'm just like, but you always write the same header on all of your documents. You always fill out the same values on those forms. You always do this when that type of email comes in and stuff like that. but she's just not in a place where I can really reach her with these things, because she believes that it will make them more complex, and it's really hard to get around that, right?
It is.
I've tried a few things where here we have this, go here, click that. I've put it in that one spot, and she still ends up actually going down into the start menu and finding it in the programs and starting it from there, because that's what she's used to, and that's what she remembers. So I could have put it many types of shortcuts or whatever. It's just not gonna work in her case. And
we get trained in our way, right? It's so hard to change.
Yeah.
And I think you're hitting two different angles of the same problem, right? Of she's already been set and she knows how to do it X way, and so that's why she does it that way. But also there's that thought of like you said, it's going to be, it's change, and it's not known, it's foreign, but it's tied, they're related, right?
Yeah, and I know you've pointed it out a few times that you have a hot string for my email, and I don't have one myself.
Yeah.
I don't write my own email that often, but
still, yeah.
With my email, no.
Okay, because that's where I use my
devices all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't do that as much as one would think.
And I have about 8 different email addresses that I have hot strings for, but I send myself a lot of emails, so I like to CC myself. I actually read an interesting article the other day about tagging, including extra things in your email, so when you search for it later, like we were just doing for that website, it's easier to find. And I'm like, oh, that's brilliant, right? I'm sending myself the stuff, but I'm not putting tags in there to help me find them later.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? I might have a script running that would allow me to open normal folders, items that I use often and stuff like with the press of a button. But until I've done a specific thing enough times, I will still go through, like, say, Internet Explorer, click through the actual path until I get to it, instead of making it a favorite, as an example, which is a built-in feature, so I could easily have it accessible. But again, we all have our ways of doing stuff, right? So and some are better to use some things, and I don't know what's the best way of doing stuff, but yeah.
No, I think
with all of the things. Yeah.
Go ahead, finish.
Go. I was just, with all of the things that we through the years have seen and read and heard and done, there's so many aspects of everything we do every day that could be optimized just a little bit.
Oh, amen. Yeah, what I was going to say was, to me, one of the biggest arguments for why you should use AutoHotkey is it's so easy to personalize it to how you think of things, like with the hot strings and hotkeys, right? It makes it, you can build it more, and your tool will be more intuitive because you built it into the key strip, whatever you want, the triggers that make sense to you, right? And so that's one of the big things I love about AutoHotkey. And you can change that, of course. If you don't like the shortcut built into the program, you can remap that to where it'll work the way you want it to work, right? And I think it's a wonderful thing why AutoHotkey is awesome.
I saw a user on Discord today or yesterday or something like that. He came on and he was ready. I want to learn. Please help me learn.
Yeah.
I want to make a hotkey that can skip back and forth from this song to the next and back. And I want this key and this key to do it. And I've tried this and this, and he showed 4 things that he had tried, and it didn't really work for him. And he was he had del calls, he had runs, he had whatever different types of things that he might have found online and stuff like that. And I wasn't the one who actually ended up helping him, so someone else did. But it ended up being like I think it was A and S or something like that. They ended up using. So A : media back, and S : media skip
Forward.
or whatever. I can't remember which forward. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Is it that simple?" Oh, I don't believe he said, "Oh my God!" But he was really, even though it was on text, you could see how amazed he was, and he had been all the way over here to try and figure it out.
Right.
And this guy who just, he might have done it himself at one point or whatever, he just had the straight up the easy solution just at hand. And this guy who was really blown away at.
My favorite example like that was I had that list. It's in a browser of all these things, and I couldn't. If I hit select all, I got too many. But otherwise, I had to manually click each checkbox. And I'm like, oh, I should come in here with COM and do all this stuff. And then I'm like, wait a minute. If I click on the first one and hit tab, it goes tab, tab. Oh, the third tab lands back on the next checkbox. And then I hit the space bar. And then I just put those like 2 lines in a loop, and I'm like, this is like a 4-line program. I think maybe it was even 3 that did. And I said, repeat 30 times, and I'd hit it and they go, flip them all. And I'm like, it was so easy. And yet it didn't dawn on me for quite a while how easy it could be. So yeah, it's so true.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm trying to keep in mind currently as well with this colleague that I talked about, the person there. She has this very simple form. I didn't even look at what type of program interface she was filling it out in, but I was just like, come on, if we take 20 minutes, I can make a tabber. I don't know what to call it, but it will send a tab, write the phrase, send 2 tabs, write the phrase, 10 tab. She can use that. It doesn't need to be more advanced than that because she's sitting right there. She's looking at it.
Maybe what you do is you do the really easy, and you say, here's a hot string for your email. You just do a super tiny sliver, right? And just you snowball it. You do one little super tiny one, and then she's like, oh, I can see how I can use that. And then she does that, and then in a week or two, like, hey, maybe, what would be cool is instead of leaving you here, it actually hits the next thing for you. Oh, okay. And just baby step into it. Maybe that's an approach that might get some interest.
Yeah, the thing for me is I would really have loved if stuff like this, you did this for people, it would make them interested in doing it themselves.
Right.
But that's just not what I'm seeing.
Oh, no.
Right?
You and I, you're creating more work.
I can. Yeah, and one of the things that I'm finding interesting is that over the last maybe 8 years or something, I've had maybe 2 colleagues out of hundreds of colleagues, perhaps, that are actually coming to me and asking, this task here, do you think that's something that could be automated? And that's because for them, it's a mind-numbing task. Pretty clever people and all of that, and might also be quite busy and all this stuff. But the idea of them actually thinking, could this be automated, is what's making me happy. I would have loved for them to maybe try and pick it up and automate it themselves, but still, the idea of people actually having that gotten that into them, that hey, task that I have can actually be automated. Most of these people are used to Excel or a button doing all kinds of stuff, but if the button is built in, people don't think it's automated.
I love it. Yeah, that's wonderful.
Right.
So true.
Yeah.
That's funny. All right, man.
Well,
good chat. unless you got something else.
Absolutely. No, not really. Could probably talk about it for you know how long. Yeah. Try to automate it. Show people that it can be automated.
Yeah. And then, like you said, I did have one I was going to throw in the end there. So my buddy Gabe Cook, right? He's a doctor, Claremont McKenna, and he reviews people's papers. He was reviewing a thesis from someone. I think he's in Australia or somewhere, but he said it was really cool. He's reading through the thesis, and inside the guy's thesis, he actually had AutoHotkey code. He had solved some sort of a problem he was doing with AutoHotkey. So he was really happy to see that like someone actually has a thesis out there with AutoHotkey in it. That's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah. There's hope for the world.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, man. It was good catching up. I'll see you next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah. Bye, Joe.